So I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement by acknowledging the Indigenous people of all the lands we are on today. And while we meet on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we all call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the effect of residential schools and colonialism on Indigenous families and communities, and to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And as always, if you'd like to put a land acknowledgement specific to your region in the chat, we certainly welcome that. Now, that's enough from me. I'm going to turn the microphone over to the host with the most, Mr. Dave Brown, in just a moment. Dave has over 10 years of broadcast experience. Early in his career, he ran a studio radio station in Ottawa. He interned at CBC Radio 3 in Vancouver, CBC Radio 1 in Ottawa, Entertainment Tonight Canada, and Global News in Toronto. His first big on-air opportunity came as a traffic reporter with CBC Radio 1 in Ottawa. And for more than 3 years, commuters started their day with Dave in their ears. Dave joined AMI TV and radio in 2015 as a bureau reporter in Ottawa. Since then, he has hosted AMI This Week and produced stories and documentaries for the network. In 2017, Dave and his team launched the Pulse AMI Radio. It's a long-form interview show that gave Dave a chance to sharpen his interview skills and connect with members of the disability community in Canada and around the world. And as well, you can join Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern or 10 o'clock New Brunswick as he discusses the latest news, entertainment, sports, and current events, all through a disability lens on Now with Dave Brown on AMI TV. And if you're really lucky, once a month, you'll catch me on there too, chatting with them. And with that, I'm going to zip of the lips and turn it over to Dave.
Shelley, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm filled with gratitude today to be a part of this really cool webinar. The idea of talking about the evolution of disability and the evolution of the tools you use to adapt is really cool. And you're going to get a chance to hear from experts in the field, in their respective fields, as well as hearing some individual testimonials today about how people's use of accessibility tools and the tools in their life have changed over time. It's a really, really fascinating idea, and I hope that it'll be enlightening and entertaining for everyone. But I'm looking forward to the opportunity to learn as well, because when you get as many experts in the field as will be joining this conversation today, you just know it's going to be a special occasion. So let's begin the proceedings right off the top with Philip Riscala. Philip is the Chief Executive Officer of Accessibility Standards Canada. Mr. Riscala has worked within the federal government for over 3 decades. After starting his career with the Federal Fire Commissionaire's Office and Public Works Government Services Canada, he worked 20 years leading research and technical teams. First as Resource Director at the Buildings Regulation National Codes Unit. Later, he became a Program Director for Construction at the National Research Council of Canada. He was appointed as the Chief Executive Officer for Accessibility Standards Canada in 2019. Here, he is spearheading the development of accessibility standards to deliver on the country's mandate to achieve a barrier-free Canada by 2040. I now turn things over to Mr. Philip Riscala.
Thank you very much, Dave. I'm hoping everybody can hear me, and I'm going to be speaking slowly enough for the interpreters as well. So I know you're probably thinking to yourself, how can the government know what are the best tools that I can use and what can empower me to live my life to the fullest? So I'm going to surprise you today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Accessibility Standards Canada, but mostly I'm going to tell you how we do what we do and why we do it. And I think after I've gone through this, you get a better appreciation for what the federal government has in mind with regards to removing barriers to accessibility. I strongly believe that all people will benefit when we are successful at ensuring a full inclusive Canada, including our family, our friends, our neighbors, our classmates, and our colleagues. We believe this is why Canadians should care about what we do. We're working for nothing less than a cultural transformation, a mindset shift, and a serious society-wide reckoning with unconscious bias. At Accessibility Standards Canada, we develop accessibility standards, as the title indicates. We also support and conduct research on accessibility. But unlike many other standards organizations, our focus is on the elimination of barriers to accessibility, both through our development of our standards as well as through the creation of the research that we fund. So let's start with the basics. What's a standard? Now, as Dave mentioned earlier on, I spent 30 years of my life prior to coming here working in the field of standards and research and regulations. So when somebody asks me what a standard is, I can speak for 6 days, or I can speak for about two bullets, which is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to keep this very, very simple and kind of tell you what standards are and why we actually create them and how they will actually help the community of persons with disabilities. So basically, a standard is like a recipe. So if you consider you're about to bake a cake for the first time in your life, and somebody gives you a basket of ingredients and says, okay, go ahead and make me a cake, it becomes very, very difficult. And chances are at the end, you're going to end up with a multitude of different types of cakes. Some of them are going to be good. Some of them are going to be bad. Some of them won't look like a cake. So essentially, when we're developing standards, it's like a recipe. We're telling you, for example, if you need to advertise a job, how do you advertise this job online so that everybody can actually have access to it and understand it and apply for that job? If you're going to build a building, or we make it accessible so that it's not just, you're not going on a wing and a prayer trying to determine, is the corridor wide enough? Is the ramp too steep? Is the door wide enough? Did we put adequate bathrooms? Are there guards? So what we end up doing by developing standards is we make this very consistent across the board. We work with our committees and we end up developing the rules and the processes and the procedures so that it's done the same across the board. So if you're traveling from New Brunswick and you're going to BC, you can expect to see the same sort of services available to you. So what do we do at Accessibility Standards Canada? We're a federal entity, but we work very, very closely with provincial and territorial partners, including New Brunswick. So I myself was born and raised in Halifax, Nova Scotia, so I have a great affinity to any occasion that I have to speak to anybody in the Maritimes. I love the Maritimes. I visit it very often. And this is something I take very near and dear to my heart. So when we work with provincial governments, and as I said, including New Brunswick, we will develop the standards, we will do the research, and we will share this information with the provincial governments so they don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel. They can take the millions of dollars that we've invested in the development of a standard or in the research and be confident that what we're providing you is going to be something that you can use or you can tailor for your use in your specific jurisdiction. So what makes us really unique, you may ask? Well, first, our standards are developed by engaging people with lived experience. These are the people that know best what their groups need, and they represent their groups on our committees. So every step of the process is designed to be accessible and engage persons with disabilities. Our office, which is situated in Gatineau, Quebec, is a top accessibility office in Canada. I would say not just among the government, but even within the private sector. It was designed by people with disabilities and has many interesting features. And I encourage anybody who's ever in Gatineau to come visit our office, and we'd be more than happy to take you on a tour. One of my favorite films is Field of Dreams. So I'm aging myself because I think this film or this movie came out in 88 or 89. But there's a quote in that film that I love, and it says, "If you build it, they will come." And I use this quote very, very often. So why do I use this quote? I'm going to talk about that in a few seconds, actually. So we don't shy away from tools and technology. They provide our employees and the people working on our technical committees a chance to fully participate in everything that we do. It's important that they contribute to the maximum of their abilities. It's no use bringing somebody into a committee or bringing them into our office if they can't participate and communicate with their colleagues. So this is why we need to try new things, experiment, gather lessons learned, and in the end, you can only make things better, either for you or for the person next to you. This is what we are learning from our employees with disabilities. I like to think we started with a blank canvas. One employee and almost nothing except a computer, a phone, and a temporary office. So when I started 4.5 years ago, or just a little over 4 years ago in the office, I walked in, one person sitting there, and it was a great opportunity for me to say, you know what, if we want to do this right, we need to do it from the ground up. So we decided to build our office so that it was the most accessible office in the country. If we did that, I go back to the little saying that I just used from Field of Dreams: if you build it, they will come. So what I felt is that if we actually built the facility, the office space, so that it was accommodating to just about everybody, we don't have to then worry about having somebody apply to the job and trying to fix something down the road and not getting it right. We made it so inviting that we had a really open and inviting environment for people to apply and work within our department. Today, after 4 years, we're about 65 employees strong, and we are ranked as one of the top employers in Canada. And people actually enjoy coming to the office to work, which is hard to believe, but people really do enjoy coming to work. We truly embody the principle of nothing without us. We put this principle into every practice in all aspects of our work and our workplace. We've incorporated that commitment to every single step in the processes that we use, from the selection of our members, developing our standards, up until the publication of our standards. We have inclusive and accessible process for our meetings. We have executive summaries in plain language. We offer ASL. We have captioning. We make sure that we offer alternative formats for documents. We use all the best technologies at our service to achieve the best results. I can remember the first day we had a meeting with our board of directors, and we were trying to figure out what is that we need to do to make sure that this is an accessible environment for our board of directors. And I should note that our board of directors is made up of about 80% persons with disabilities. So we were doing this for the first time, running a board meeting in a hotel. So outside of trying to find a hotel that was accessible and making sure that we had all the right formats of information and documentation and all the tools that were necessary to make sure that we ran a very smooth meeting, we thought down to the finite detail. We had members that used guide dogs. So we made sure we had treats for the dogs. We made sure that we had a conference room or a hotel that had an outside space for the dog to be walked, to relieve itself. We took every little piece into account when we were going through this process, and we learned a lot. We didn't get it right the first time, but we kept asking, what do we need to do to change? What do we need to do to improve? And every meeting since then, we've been improving. And it just becomes second nature now. We don't book a hotel if it's not accessible to all. We don't book a restaurant for our members if it's not accessible to all. We do not book rooms for anyone if it's not accessible to all. We don't give out documentations to our board directors if it's not put in a format that everybody can read, whether it's a plain language, whether it's larger font, whether it has alt text. If those tools and those mechanisms are not embedded in every single document we put forward, that document doesn't go into our board agendas or into any of our work. So that's just a principle that we follow, and it's become second nature to us. In short, our mindset is to be accessible by design. As a result, our standards will be better. I guarantee you our standards will be better. We will operate at full capacity, inclusively, and deliver world-class results. And we're seeing the fruits of this labor already. We're seeing some of the best standards come out of our organization, and we have a lot of interest from other countries and many provinces right now to look at our standards and start using our standards. But all this is possible because people tell us what they need. They're very open to tell us we need specific tools for the job, and they're curious about what can accommodate them. In my past career, before I came over to Accessibility Standards Canada, as Dave had mentioned, I worked at the National Research Council, and I probably participated on or ran 300 to 500 committees in that 20-year period that I was at the National Research Council. And I often used to ask myself, why is it that people that are persons with disabilities are not participating in our committees, and why we're developing standards for them, yet none of them are participating. None of them are actually coming to us and applying to be members of our committees. And what I understood is that we had environments that were not conducive to actually allow people to come in. And so again, I go back to that first saying, if you build it, they will come. So while I sat here and I scratched my head and say, why are they not coming? The onus is really on us. They weren't coming because we didn't make it accessible for them to come. So what we've done differently right here is that anytime we are running a committee, for us, the onus is always going to be on us, whether it's running a committee to develop standards, whether it's hiring employees within our office, whether it's advertising a grants and contribution that we're going to be offering to the public. We make sure that every element is accessible. We make sure that we work very, very hard to constantly improve or consistently improve the way in which we actually broadcast, the way in which we hire, the way in which we provide support to our technical committee members, and then they will come. They end up coming to our committees. And I can tell you, and I don't like to throw a lot of stats, but I'm going to throw a couple of numbers at you. Originally, when I used to work on committees, we would have about 90% males on our committees, 10% females or other genders on our committees. And that was roughly how committees were broken down. And you may get an occasional 1 or 2% of persons with disabilities, if they actually self-identified. Today, we're proud to say that when we have our committees, we have gender neutrality on our committees. We have representation of male, female, non-binary. We have over 50% of our members are persons with disabilities. We have BIPOC representation. We have representation across the board, and it's because we have deliberately put in the tools and the mechanisms to allow us to attract the best talent. And so it doesn't become, well, we're shaking our head after the fact, why aren't people coming? It's no, if they're not coming now after we're providing all the tools, then we're not doing something right. We need to change again. But I think we're starting to get it right. We are one of the only organizations in the world that has the numbers that I just quoted. And again, I'm not going to quote any more numbers to you, but this is a number that I'm very, very proud of. There is an untapped expert pool out there. And we know that with the labor shortage, the wealth of knowledge that we can benefit from is huge. And this can only be possible if we provide the tools for everybody to come into the office, the tools for everybody to participate on our committees, the tools for everybody to apply for grants and contributions. We've heard many times that if you design for the outliers, you'll meet the needs of everyone. And so what I mean by this is, if you're designing for all of society, everybody benefits. But if you only design for the 75%, which is generally what happens right now when you think of construction codes, for example, they design for the 75% population. If they end up doing that, what ends up happening is the onus comes back onto the community of persons with disabilities to fight for what they should have had in the first place. So you design for the 75%, and then that 25%, the persons with disabilities, the other marginalized groups, they end up having to fight to get what that 75% had, which is a completely wrong approach. So what we do when we're designing our standards, what we do when we're designing any policies or practices, is we design for everyone. Again, you design for everyone, everybody benefits. You don't have to come back and fight for what you should have had in the first place. Tools and technologies, as we know, benefit everyone. E-readers, plain language, descriptive text, large fonts, captioning, anything that provides support to allow somebody to do their work better benefits everyone. Even if you don't have a visible disability or an invisible disability, how useful would it be to have a prescription pill that you can actually read? Everybody could benefit from that. How useful would it be to sign on to a telephone contract and not have to read through 6,000 pages of gibberish and not understand what you're signing? These are all things that everybody would benefit from. Wouldn't it be great to know that if you had a specific tool or a specific standard, even a door opener going into a building, it benefits everyone, not just people that have mobility disabilities or anything coming into a site, but these would benefit everybody. So if you get it again into your mindset that we're not designing for a very small subset of people, or we're designing for everybody to benefit from, it becomes a much easier sell for the community and for persons and for designers going forward. Now, what do we do with the knowledge that we have? And how do we make this benefit everyone? We ask that all departments at all levels, be it federal, provincial, municipal, come and visit our offices and learn from what we've put into place. So what we've been doing lately is we've been encouraging many of the departments, anytime they come to Ottawa, anytime they come to Gatineau, to come and visit our site, because what we actually put into our office space was very easy to do. Yes, it wasn't the norm with what typical government does, but when people walk through our office, they recognize that, you know what, you have all these accessibility features in your building, and we can't even tell that they're specifically accessibility features. They just make sense. They make sense for everyone. So if you do the design right, you're not putting something in that's a distraction. You're not putting something in that's an onus on the designers, on everybody else. It's something that everybody benefits from. And that's what people are recognizing when they come into our buildings. We feel that there's a momentum going on. And the more vocal people with disabilities are about their needs and how they can be accommodated, the better society as a whole will be in providing those tools and changing technologies. If we push the envelope today and set new expectations for a new normal, it becomes the norm of tomorrow. So let me repeat that. If we push the envelope today and set the new expectations for a new normal, it becomes the norm for tomorrow. We're no longer fighting to get what we want. My very first speech that I gave when I started this job, I said, the only way we're going to remove accessibility is no longer to create accessibility standards. And people are saying, what? Like, what do you mean? We are an accessibility organization. What do you mean if we want to remove accessibility, we no longer create accessibility standards? Well, what I mean by that is that if you embed it in the full design, in the full process, in the full procedures, and all regulations that exist right now, and don't put it as a subset of those procedures, then it just becomes a set of regulations for everyone. You don't necessarily need something different to accommodate a community of persons with disabilities. To go back to my recipe analogy from the beginning, the proof is in the pudding. Thanks to what we offer, people with disabilities lead the work at Accessibility Standards Canada. As I mentioned earlier, our board of directors is majority led by persons with disabilities. People with disabilities make up over a quarter of our staff. So if you look at that in perspective, the workforce availability is about 5 to 7, maybe 5 to 9%. We are 25+% of our staff are persons with disabilities. Again, we provided the tools and the environment to allow that to happen. 58% of our members on our technical committees are persons with disabilities. Our grants and contributions are only awarded to persons with disabilities. One thing that I've learned and what I want to share with you in conclusion is that when you have the accommodation, it often works for everyone. So don't be shy to ask. Do not shy away from it. It's time to offer them. And I have an example that Stephanie Cadieux, our accessibility officer, raised a few days ago. And I like the example because I want to use it here. So a factory worker with a disability needed an assembly template to do his work. So the managers reluctantly spent some money to make this happen. They bought this template, gave it to the worker. A few weeks later, the managers came back and requested 40 more templates to be used by all the other workers. And what they realized is that template that they gave for the person with the disability caused that person to work much faster than anybody else on the assembly line. So here's an example where somebody was providing a tool for somebody on an assembly line to meet the needs of that disability. But what they recognize and what they realize is that same tool that they provided to that individual helped everybody across the board. This is an example of providing tools that actually will benefit everyone. There's a metaphor that says, if you're clearing snow, clear the ramp first before the stairs, because everyone can use the ramp. So if you remember that going forward, we will start to get this right. I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm not sure if I have a few minutes to field questions or later on, but I will sit down and listen to all the other guests that are speaking after me. And there's a great lineup coming up after it. Thank you very much, Dave.
Philip, that was, yes, Shelley, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I just got to interrupt for a second. Dr. Mills, who's supposed to present, unfortunately has had an emergency and is not going to be with us, it looks like. We're just going to throw our schedule off. So what this means is we'll just skip her spot. If she can make it near the end, we'll put her in. But if not, we'll have some extra time for some questions at the end. So just to throw everyone to a tizzy.
Excellent.
Or I can speak for another hour if you like.
I know you could.
Well, Shelley, Philip kind of mentioned it there. Do you want to hold all the Q&A till the end of the webinar? Okay,
think that's the
Perfect.
best.
That makes all the sense in the world. And yes, absolutely. We can move past Dr. Mills, but before we get to our next guest, I want to share some testimonials with you, because I think what Philip did there was really set the context, the big picture context, and the work that's being done around standards and the evolution. But we know as individuals, we go through our own evolutions as well. So you're going to hear a couple of stories today from people and how they've gone through their own evolution with the right tools for the job. And we're beginning with Muriel Petrie. Muriel has spina bifida. When she was a child, she used crutches. As a young adult, she could not keep up with her increasingly busy life on crutches without getting extremely tired and experiencing more pain. And so she started using a manual chair. She was still using her braces and crutches, but then when she bought a car and started driving, her braces were getting caught in the hand controls. That's not good. She had to stop wearing the braces. Despite having gone through this type of change already, she was taken aback when a manager at work asked her one day if she was comfortable doing long days sitting at her computer in her manual chair, and, quote, had she ever considered getting a more comfortable power chair, end quote. Muriel immediately said, OMG, no, and thought to herself, what is he thinking? I am not in that category of people with disabilities. Gradually, the idea started to anchor in her brain. And as the manager asked her if she would consider talking with their in-house rehabilitation coordinator, finally, she went for it. And she was so thankful to the awesome manager who planted this seed in her brain. This allowed Muriel to work for another 15 years, and today her life is better for it. She is a prime example of what acceptance can do for your life. So yes, you're going to be hearing a couple testimonials throughout the course of this, but again, it's a little more context and tangible examples of what's going on in terms of people's lives and the evolution you can make, and sometimes understanding that there are different tools you can utilize. So let's move on to our next contributor, next presenter. It's Stéphane Morin. Stéphane Morin is a clinical educator for Permobile Canada, serving Quebec and the Atlantic provinces. Before becoming an educator, he was a prescribing occupational therapist in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, as well as Ontario, with a specialty in seating and positioning. He's based in Moncton, New Brunswick, and so happy to be able to share his experiences and education with clinicians in the area. So with no further ado, I welcome to the presentation and the webinar, Stéphane Morin. Stéphane, take it away.
Thank you very much, Dave. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Okay, so I am going to share a PowerPoint presentation. So give me a moment and see if I can get my technology in order. So I'm going to get my slideshow going. I don't normally do Zoom. So can you see my screen?
Not yet. So you hit share screen and then click on your presentation on your screen.
Okay.
There you go. It's coming up now.
Beautiful.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, so happy to be here to talk to you all. So as Dave pointed out, I am an occupational therapist and I'm a clinical educator. So I work for a manufacturer of mobility products, Permobile. And so when Muriel asked me to come and talk, I started thinking about, I love the topic, right tools for the job. And so I kind of thought about, obviously I'm going to be talking from a mobility point of view, but I am going to, at the end, talk a little bit about technology that we all have access to, or most of us do. So I started thinking about it. Let me see if I can advance my slides, because this is interesting. Aha, there we go. This is who I am, just in case you couldn't see me here. So, but I wanted to break this technology piece that I'm speaking about into a couple of different categories. First of all, from my sort of what I've been doing for almost the last 20 years is talking about mobility. And a lot of the technology I'm talking about isn't new, but I'm very passionate about making both end users and clinicians aware of the technology that has advanced. So what I wanted to speak of first, and Dave, in you talking about the testimonies, especially from Muriel, kind of fits very, very well, dovetails very well in this first part of my presentation. And what I want to talk about first is power assist. And what I mean by that is power assist, I have a picture here, is an adjunct or an add-on to a manual wheelchair. So when you were talking about Muriel and her testimonials of how she progressed from requiring crutches and braces to a manual wheelchair and then to a power wheelchair, not all persons with mobility issues who require mobility products can access powered mobility, sometimes because of transportation issues, sometimes because of accessibility issues. And power assist is a really great sort of technology or tool. So here are some variety of different types. This is a hub mounted. This is a front mounted. And so what has changed with the tools is that batteries have changed. Battery technology has changed. Batteries have become smaller and stronger. So people are able to go farther. They're able to use these coupled with a manual wheelchair. And I have a little video here, but I want to just talk about this. In what I do, I talk to a lot of end users, and I talked to one particular gentleman who's a manual wheelchair user for a long time, probably 20 years. And he started talking about he would work very hard with getting places with his manual wheelchair. He was very social. He was employed. He was doing all kinds of stuff. But he got to the point where it was harder and harder for him to expend all of the energy of pushing his manual wheelchair, that when he got somewhere, that he didn't have any energy to socialize or participate. And when he got his own power assist device, it allowed him to actually enjoy his life so he could continue to participate, and he wasn't exhausted when he got to an event, a party, to work. And so I just wanted to see, I want to show you this video. This is of an end user, and she submitted it to Permobile, and I don't know her name, but I just love this video because it just shows how she uses her power assist so that she can live her life. She can be with her dog. She can be outside and enjoy being in the outdoors. She can participate. But what I find a lot of end users use, they can use it to travel and be able to travel independently. Some of my friends use this kind of technology and this tool in order to be able to get through an airport and get and travel and live their lives. So that is the first tool for the job. This isn't new, but that technology continues to evolve to really help persons who, like I said, sometimes can't access powered mobility. But those persons who can get access to powered mobility, there are some amazing tools for the job that not all clinicians or end users are aware of. And that's part of why I do what I do for a living now, is to teach people and show them that this exists. So a lot of power wheelchairs, they're not all made the same, but they all share a lot of similar technology, just like cars, just like computers. Power wheelchairs can have power seat functions. So tilt, reclining backrests, elevation. These are all wonderful functional tools. In my personal experience as a prescriber, I've prescribed many what I call fully loaded chairs, meaning they have lots of different power seat functions that end users can use for safety, being able to shift positions in order to be able to save their skin from skin breakdown. But this type of technology can be rather complex and difficult to use. And I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but just like a car, and not all cars have this type of technology, but you can have memory seating, especially in higher end cars. Well, power wheelchairs have that same function. And what memory seating allows, and not all clinicians know about this, is it can allow for end users to be able to use memory functions so that at the push of one button, they can get their wheelchair into a functional position, either to redistribute their pressure to save their skin, or to get themselves into a functional position to be able to do their activities of daily living. I'm going to tell a very quick story. I had a gentleman in northern New Brunswick whom I prescribed this chair, and he had a whole bunch of power seat functions. And his wife called me about a year later and said that he was really scared of breaking his chair. He was very confused, not confused, but just anxious about, it was just overwhelming. It was too much stuff. So I went back and I suggested, why don't we look at programming some memory functions? And I programmed 2 buttons. One button put him in a great position so that he could watch television. But it was also a really great position that actually saved his skin, took a lot of the pressure away from his bottom. The other position put him in a bit of a perched position so that he could get next to his bed and with the push of a button, get into a nice and easy transfer position. And with those 2 memory functions, his life changed. And I remember his wife called me about a week later and she was crying that she was so happy that he was able to be independent, because normally it was her that was pushing the buttons and getting him into these positions. So just a great tool for the job. I'm going too slowly because I'm really passionate about this. So I want to show more of these videos. This is another great functional tool. This is called, Permabile calls it active reach, but what it is, it's a combination. You see Rochelle here getting into a fridge. At the wheelchair level, it can be very difficult to function. The world is not designed for persons at the wheelchair level. But what that does is it allows a person to be up and a little bit forward so they can reach. A lot of my clients have a hard time even just getting into their fridge. This is a really great tool. Here's another interesting, this is a sequence of movements that allow persons, again with the pushing of a button, to be able to pull themselves back. A lot of times wheelchair users tend to slide out of their positioning and have to ask caregivers if they don't have the ability to push themselves back. This is called independent repositioning mode. Not all manufacturers have this. I'll play this video one more time. Basically, a sequence, it tilts back so that that person slides back into their seating. Their legs come up, kind of holds them in place. Everything opens up so that they're in a very wonderfully, they can really distribute their pressure more evenly, so it saves the skin on their bottom, and it's a very comfortable position. So again, a great set of tools to help people be independently able to manage their positioning and their skin protection and their function in their wheelchair. Another tool that can be sometimes a challenge from a funding point of view, but standing wheelchairs is not a new technology, but it is ever progressing and becoming easier to access. I know in the United States, elevation is now being funded more regularly by Medicaid, pardon me. And I think standing is going to be the next, that if the United States starts funding more tools like standing, I think it's going to trickle down or trickle up to Canada. But there are all kinds of amazing health benefits for standing. But I just want to point out, I have a couple of pictures here. Up on the top is, his name is, and I can't see my notes anymore, but his name is, he's a Japanese DJ and he has ALS. And he uses standing with his power wheelchair in order to be able to DJ. And I believe his name is, his nickname is Masa. But he's quite a well-known DJ in Japan, but he's able to stand in front of his audience with his wheelchair, and just a fantastic tool to allow people to, again, be functional, be face-to-face with people. It's a wonderful tool. But there's also tools for connection. As human beings, we want to connect with each other. We want to be social. We want to participate. So there are wonderful tools for the job. So this is a real quick shout out to the technicians who help keep power wheelchairs and manual wheelchairs running and on the road. And having worked all over rural New Brunswick, persons with disabilities who live far away from a technician, if their wheelchair breaks down, it can be just, it can just be so difficult for them to be able to do anything, just because that's their life. They need their mobility, and if it doesn't work, then they're stuck in bed. So a lot of manufacturers now have connected chairs, so that you can actually, there's a chip, you can have a chip in your power wheelchair, so that a technician can actually log into your power wheelchair and take a look at error codes and error messages, and look at your battery usage and see and help diagnose issues from afar, so that, say you're 2-3 hours away from your technician, well, if he or she can kind of log into your chair and get a better idea of what's happening, then they can actually send a technician with the right part, hopefully they've got it in stock, or they can help problem solve from afar if, say, that person wasn't necessarily charging their wheelchair properly. So it's another great tool to help keep that person connected to that team of people that help keep their chair up and running. But it's not just connecting with the people who help keep your technology up and running, but helping to be able to participate and communicate with your loved ones, your colleagues, your schoolmates, your neighbors. So there's a lot of connectability that can be built into power wheelchairs for communication, returning to work, returning to school, to be engaged, to participate. So you can, through a power wheelchair and whatever type of control that you have with this power wheelchair, you can use that to emulate a mouse with a computer. You can use your power wheelchair control to control your tablet or your smartphone. Fantastic tool, because if you can control your tablet, your phone, well, with the ever-changing technology of Bluetooth and smart home technology, suddenly you can be able to control more of your environment, more of your life. And so I'm going to show this. This is Todd. He is
combined with Siri,
just going to play the video. You'll see. He explains it very well.
Todd can navigate his iPhone and control his smartphone using external switches and voice commands.
Hey Siri, lock the front door. Between Siri and switch control, I can use my phone just as good as anybody with 10 working fingers and hands. You know how I do.
At Apple, we see accessibility as a basic human right. For some people, doing something like turning on your lights or opening a blind or changing your thermostat might be seen as a convenience. But for others, that represents empowerment and independence and dignity.
Todd runs his IT consulting firm from home,
I just sent you the report log for the day.
sending more than 100 voice-powered text messages every day. But what's more, he's a husband who can care for his wife.
Technology has completely changed how Todd can operate and where he can function.
Kitchen ceiling light on.
So when I'm cooking, I don't have to stop and do those functions. He can facilitate and do those. Makes my heart swell.
I'm going to finish on stepping away from mobility. So I just wanted to end on, we all have access to smart technology, and that tool is always evolving. And the more we can use that to stay connected, I think is fantastic. I appreciate you allowing me to chat. So thank you very much.
Well, Stefan, that was a really great presentation. And again, I think it's really driving home the point that there are different kinds of evolutions and different kinds of tools available. Some are very specific to accessibility, and some are just sitting there on a random store shelf at a major retailer. And to put these things together can really make a difference in people's lives. And that's something that's going to come across here with the next testimonial that you're going to hear from Jerry Harris. Jerry is from St. John and is legally blind, just like me, but he does have some vision. just like me. Jerry's been able to work from home using a variety of tools and has become a tech guru that helps the New Brunswick Coalition of Persons with Disabilities quite often. Like so many folks with disabilities, he thinks and works outside the box, using technologies in different ways to live his best life. Jerry uses a high contrast theme on Windows, the Windows narrator, the NVDA screen reader, as well as using large text on his computer. He also utilizes voiceover technology on his iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV and described audio whenever it's available. And of course, there's always going to be that struggle out there in the world. And Jerry would love to use public transportation more often and is still waiting for the city of St. John to implement a very important tool for so many folks with disabilities, the automated voice system. So there you go, a little bit of advocacy from Jerry right there as the last point as part of the testimonial. And definitely, I remember the first time I moved from Montreal to Ottawa, where the buses announced the stops. And I thought to myself, what a great idea that is, and how useful this would have been for me growing up in Montreal. Let's keep the conversation going about individuals and technology and development and the things that can grow through a lifetime of work. So the next person you're going to hear from
Dave?
is, yes.
Sorry, it's Muriel. Dr. Rebecca Mills is here now, so we could.
Oh, okay. Well, we can backtrack then and bring in Dr. Mills. So just give me one moment as I work my way back here, sort of working into the script here. And here we go. So, well, firstly, it's great to have Dr. Rebecca Mills as the next person speaking and joining the conversation. Dr. Rebecca Mills works as a psychologist at the Stan Cassidy Center for Rehabilitation, New Brunswick's provincial tertiary neuro rehab center. She has worked there for over 20 years with the adult team, serving adults with neurological injuries and illnesses. And her presentation is going to be called "The Psychology Behind Acceptance and Using the Right Tools." So with no further ado, let's welcome into the conversation Dr. Rebecca Mills.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up if you can hear me. It looks like some nods and so on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I am late. I really have no good excuse. I honestly forgot. So I'm just going to be honest that I am late because I forgot. And thank goodness my colleague Chelsea, who is in the audience, sent me a text wondering where I was. And that's just being out of routine. So my apologies. I'm a little bit flustered, but I think I'm okay. Well, and I know we're late. Just so I know, do I need to do a rushed version? I know we are supposed to wrap up by 3. Can somebody, maybe Muriel, let me know? Or do we have time? Do you want me to do?
You've got your full time. We switched someone around, so you're all good to go.
Okay. Well, I'm going to thank you for doing that, and I will share my screen. And this start my PowerPoint. The thing is in the way. Let me slideshow. Okay. There we go. So today I'm going to be talking about acceptance. Acceptance. Thank you for the introduction. And as you heard, I am a psychologist, and I work in neuro rehab. And I have for over 20 years. And a lot of what I end up doing with our clientele is help them with acceptance, because our clientele all have disabilities, usually acquired in adulthood for the most part. So it's a big life change, and I end up trying to help them with. So I'll get started. So acceptance is really hard. And as my title said, it is not a 4-letter word. People feel like it is a 4-letter word. It's a hard thing to work through, because change is very hard. We aren't really wired to change and to accept. We like to stay in the same comfortable path. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Acceptance is really hard because people equate acceptance with giving up hope or with failure. So they think of, if I have to do something different, as I come to terms with my injury or my illness, it's like giving up, or I failed in some way. So people resist it. That's one of the reasons. And making big decisions is tough when we really cannot predict the future. When we don't really, often people with disabilities don't really know what the future holds. Well, nobody knows what the future holds, but it's especially true when you have a new injury or illness to come to terms with. You don't really know what the future brings, and you've got a bunch of experts telling you what they think you need, and maybe you don't really agree with that or understand that or know what the future is. Nobody does. Another thing that's hard about acceptance is others around you may not accept the new you. You may find your family members push back against the changes or don't really accept, or maybe they're in denial. And so that can slow down the process. Acceptance means finding new ways of thinking and acting, and it is hard work. And acceptance also means living in the present moment. We're wired to either sort of dwell on the past or regret or miss the past or wish for the good old days. That's the way we tend to think. And we also sometimes get stuck worrying about the future or living the future that we can't predict. And so it's kind of unnatural just to live in the present moment, to accept just to live for today or live day to day. But lack of acceptance can feed into a struggle. I showed you that picture at the beginning, like the tug of war with yourself. It's a struggle. And that can lead to more pain, physical and emotional pain, and anxiety and stress. And it feeds into avoidance of not really making changes and moving on, and often leads to prolonged suffering. And part of that struggle is holding on to autonomy. And no one wants unsolicited advice. No one wants to be nagged, and we all want to run our own lives. That's what autonomy means, being able to have control over your own life, manage your own life, and nobody wants it to be any other way. So we tend to pull in the other direction. But what happens when you let go of that struggle? If everybody let go, what would happen? There are some benefits of acceptance. Acceptance is to focus on your values, and that's where we usually start, looking at what is really the most important things to you. If you can focus on your values, what would happen? It can help you to lead to appropriate and positive behavior change. Maybe things will change in a good way for you. You may set new goals, appropriate goals. You can hopefully learn to live more in the moment for the present. It can lead to feelings of peace, reduces your anxiety and that sense of struggle, and may get us unstuck if we accept and move on to the next change, whatever that is. It brings us into that current reality rather than being stuck in the past or worrying about the future. Acceptance is considered an active process and a positive process. And I say that because it's the opposite of giving up. It's not giving up. It's about making change. It's about setting new goals, making choices. But it also must be done in our own time and in our own way. So like I said, acceptance is not giving up. It's not being passive. It's not being apathetic. It's an active process of making change and making choices. But it's also not assuming that the present is your future. Things could still change. Like I said, we can't predict the future. We learn to roll with it rather than fight with it. So I mentioned about living to our values. This is where we start. And it's all about, thinking about what do you value? What is the most important things to you in your life? Is it your family? Is it your health? Is it your relationships? Maybe even your pets, your work, your home, hobbies, recreational activities, your spiritual health. It could be just about anything that you value. And that's what we focus on. What can help you get to those things you value or do those things you value? So acceptance doesn't mean giving up on your goals, but it might mean you put some of your goals on hold while you maybe make new goals so that you can live to your values. You can create new doable goals. We'll talk about SMART goals in a minute. But before we just go into the next part of that, why is change so difficult? And again, it's the way the human brain is wired. We get comfortable in our routines. And we all live with people. Pretty much everybody lives with people or have people in our lives. And those people are comfortable in their routines. And so to do something different actually triggers stress and fear. It actually makes there's changes in the brain that makes us anxious when we have to face change. It takes effort. It might mean giving up something or letting go of some things. It requires making decisions. And usually making one change means making several changes. For instance, if you decide to get a wheelchair, for instance, you may need to then change renovate your house or get a new ramp or a new vehicle. So changes lead to other changes. But we are wired to take the path of least resistance. That, in other words, our brains tell us to take the safest and comfortable route. And that's very much human nature. So change is hard. So let's just use an analogy of giving up smoking. Most people think, well, smoking, of course, it makes sense to give up smoking. It's illogical to smoke. But, on the one side, giving up smoking means reducing your cancer risk, you have better cardiovascular health, you have nicer teeth, better breath, you save money, you have more time for other things. Those are all obvious positives for giving up smoking. But there's also another side to it. That means it isn't irrational. Giving up smoking can also mean going through difficult withdrawal. Nicotine withdrawal is very uncomfortable. You also have to find new coping strategies. You might lose friends or have to make new friends because your smoking buddies aren't going to be around. You might gain weight. It requires effort to give up smoking. So when you put it this way, making change is sometimes, it's obviously very difficult, and sometimes your reasons for not changing are logical. And that needs to be acknowledged whenever facing change, trying to accept something new. So let's use another example of getting a power wheelchair. Some people resist this. I've seen it a lot at work. They don't want to change from a walker or a manual wheelchair to a power wheelchair. On the con side, they feel like they might look more disabled. Then people might judge them. They're expensive. Power wheelchairs, maybe they take up more room. They're hard to transport. Some people worry about being less active and maybe gaining weight or getting out of shape. So those are all logical reasons for not wanting to get a wheelchair. But there are good reasons too. On the pro side, getting a power wheelchair, you might have more energy. Maybe you'd be in a better mood if you're not so tired and cranky. You can get further distances when you're out and about in town or wherever. You may have more energy to do more of your activities of daily living or your instrumental activities of daily living. You can probably participate more in several activities. And in many ways, you're actually less disabled. So how do we start the acceptance and change process? So I mentioned values. That's where we usually start, as I said. So you focus on your values. What is really important to you? How can I enjoy the activities that are really important? This might mean doing them differently, or maybe using equipment, but still being able to do those activities. Maybe it's time with your family, maybe it's getting out to your place of spiritual worship, or maybe it's getting out into nature, or maybe it's going to bingo every weekend. It doesn't really matter. It's your choice. What do you value? What do you enjoy? How can we make that work? It might mean setting new goals. I'd mentioned SMART goals. I won't go into the details, but SMART goals are goals that are really specific, measurable, attainable. You can do them, relevant, they mean something to you, and they're time limited, or timely in some way. You can do them now, they're important now, they have a time limit. So sometimes working with an OT or a psychologist or somebody else to help create goals and to look at those goals as you focus on your values is a good exercise to figure out what you could change to make that acceptance process work. And remember, the change is hard. Willpower is a bit of a myth. Nobody likes change, but it means making choices that are good for you. So I showed you weighing the pros and cons. I often do this with clients or patients, write down the pros and cons of accepting something new or making some kind of a change. And there are logical reasons usually on both sides of that table or that piece of paper. There's pros and cons always. And sometimes putting them down in black and white can be really helpful, making it clearer. Talking to others close to you is helpful. Remember, if you change, others will have to too. And hopefully they can support you in going through those changes. So remember that, as I keep saying, acceptance and change are both tough. So cut yourself some slack, give yourself some time. It's not something easily done overnight to make a big change, or whether it's a piece of equipment or something new like that in your life. And remember, there's no such thing as failure. There will be setbacks when trying new things, but you can always try again. And I'm not exactly sure who's all in the audience, but if you are a healthcare provider, do not nag. If you can try, you may be well-meaning and you think you have all the information, but the person on the other side will not respond well to any kind of nagging. We need to allow the person the time to think things through, think through all the options, give them the time. And I often ask permission before I give advice or information, because a person really needs to be ready for it. They have to be in the right mind frame to be listening and to be ready for those changes. So asking permission and offering the information without nagging is really key. And here are the resources that a couple of really good options for people if you want to read. These are basic textbooks, mostly for psychologists, but other people, obviously OTs or other healthcare providers, could certainly find them useful as well. And that's it. So I'm going to stop screen sharing. And I don't know if anybody has any questions. I know we're running a little over time, so.
Sorry, we'll actually do questions either at the end if there's time, or we will take the questions and send them to the presenters by email.
That's great. Sure, no problem.
Time constraints. It's tight.
Well,
thank you very much.
Dr. Mills, thank you so much for that presentation. And certainly, yeah, the idea of mindset is so important. But if you could send that note about nagging to my girlfriend, we'd be very appreciative about that one as well.
Sure. You give me your email address. I'll do that.
Well, that was just a really thoughtful spot to continue this conversation. And as you can tell, we're covering a lot of bases here. And that's one of the really neat things about this webinar, bringing in expertise from so many different elements of the lived experience, whether that be the mental side, the tools side, or the regulatory side. And let's continue this conversation. Let's keep putting brick upon brick and build this wonderful foundation of knowledge by bringing in Alain Désir, an occupational therapist with the Neil Squire Society. Alain joined Neil Squire in 2018 as the organization's first occupational therapist on the staff in the Atlantic region. Alain has held a variety of positions in the health field, as a caseworker for individuals with mental health disabilities, as an OT in home care, and as a clinical specialist in telehealth. Alain has also worked in the pharmaceutical industry as a biomedical engineer. Alain enjoys working with people and technology. He says that working with Neil Squire gives him the opportunity to combine these two interests of his. And with no further ado, let's welcome in Alain for his presentation, The Right Tool for the Job, on the Job.
Thank you very much, Dave. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Dave, for this introduction. Okay, let me prepare my presentation. Here we are. Okay, so my presentation for today is Resistance is Futile, Resisting the Use of Assistive Technologies. The flow of the presentation will be the following. I'll do a quick history of Neil Squire. Then we'll jump into the subject of the presentation with resistance to change, then resistance to assistive technologies and disability, and how they relate, the right assistive technology, and resistance is futile. As you can see, I'm a Star Trek fan. History of Neil Squire. Neil Squire was a 21-year-old university student who had a car accident and was left paralyzed from the neck down. Family and friends used different technologies, computers, to help him communicate. And after his passing, Neil Squire was founded. Neil Squire enables people with disabilities to achieve their goals using offering 5 services. The services that are offered are innovation, so makers making change, which offers 3D printing services to individuals, or any tools that need to be made by volunteers in the community or by engineers working at Neil Squire. We also collaborate with government and with other agencies offering services to people with disability. We offer services for digital literacy, where we help and support people learn and use digital devices. We offer also employment services for people with disability to find work. And lastly, we offer assistive technology services, which include the OT program where I am. Resistance to change. Resistance to change, as was discussed by Dr. Rebecca Mills, is the willingness to adapt or difficulty to adapt to new circumstances when they arrive. It's a natural human behavior where a person is not ready to accept the proposed changes. Change is scary and challenging, and it's easier to maintain the status quo than to change. Intersection of resistance to using AT and disability. A research article from the National Institute of Health and Research provided different reasons why people are resistant to using ATs in their lives. And the first reason is psychological barriers, where a person may have fears of using a new device, or is fearful of the bad experience in the past using a device, and so is not willing to try a new device. There are also social barriers, where if the society has stigma when it comes to certain disabilities, then the person is not really open to become the target of that stigma. Their society can also have barriers, physical barriers and structure. For example, like the first presenter spoke to us about the surroundings, adapted or universal design of the environment. Then there's design and function. If the proposed device is too big, too small, too heavy, is not user-friendly, the person will not be using the device. If there's not an awareness of the existence of the device, or if the person has the device but does not have the proper information on how to use it, or if the professionals like the OTs or that are teaching or supporting the individual do not have the proper training for using the device, then the person is or not really open to using that. Also, the way that service is provided to the individual affects its use. If there's a lot of paperwork that has to be written, completed, if there are long timelines for delivery of the device, and then it's not very conducive for the use of the of AT. And then finally, the support network is very important. So if the family of or caregivers of the person do not support the use of the device or the exploration of new devices, then the person will probably not look into acquiring new devices or using it. Also, it would akin to the support network. One thing that research had denoted is that the willingness to hear of users of a certain device is really something that's really important. If the person can hear what users their daily experiences, then they're more open to trying it. Other reasons are stereotypes related to disability. If they're not wanting to be wanting to go and have the hassle of how society sees them. Well, it's related, I guess, to the stigma, societal stigma. There's the independence and sense of control. So most people see the devices as providing independence, but sometimes it is seen as a hindrance to independence and losing a sense of control. For example, if the person has a progressive condition where they are losing their abilities, so adding a AT in their lives is not really seen as a positive. AT also can be seen as a last resort. Well, I'm not disabled enough, so I will not be using the device. Aesthetics is also very important. So maybe, well, in Stefan's video, you had the lady that had customized her wheelchair with the bright wheels. So it's really important for the device or the device to look like the person, and so that they feel that the device is part of them, is not separate from them. Lastly, cost is a very big barrier for using assistive technology, and other people's fears also. That was surprising, where some people prefer not to use AT because they do not want to worry their loved ones, their carers, because if they are using new AT, then the loved ones will think that their condition is getting worse, so they don't want to burden them with that. So then, if the right AT is not used, what are the consequences? The main consequences are with quality of life. And previous presenters spoke about tiredness, there's physical aches and pains, social isolation, poor mental health. In the case of not using devices for supporting learning, then school, not excelling in school will be a consequence. Employment is a big consequence of not having the right AT. Which will affect inequality, social or economic inequalities. And in certain countries or localities, not having the right AT affects sustainable development. For example, in a country that has undergone warfare and there are a lot of people that are physically injured, with amputations or having missing limbs, then if they are not provided with the right AT, the economic and social development of that locality or that country will be really hurt by that. And one of the other impacts is the increased physical and emotional effort on caregivers. So, for example, it could be if the person is physically disabled and needs to have physical support from caregivers, and lifts are not used in the home, then the physical effort of caregivers is dramatically increased. Now, how can we promote the use of assistive devices? The main thing is trying to overcome the resistance is by incorporating the person in the decision process. And if the person does not feel that they're centered, or like in OT we say client-centered, if the person does not feel that they're being heard, their needs, preferences, and concerns are being listened to, if they do not feel that they're part of the decision or selection design process, then chances are they will not be using that device. So having the clients or the patient's engagement in the decision process is very important, and that will increase the likelihood that the AT will be used. It's very important also to identify the fears and misconceptions and biases of the client, and for that, motivational interviewing is one of the strategies that can be used to support the person in promoting change, because motivational interviewing targets or the motivation for change. So it is also important to highlight how the AT can meet the needs of the person and how it will impact their life, especially their quality of life. So if the person can see the positives and how the AT will support them in their lives, that will make a big difference for usability. Financial support is in another aspect that will support, well, that will confront, overcoming resistance to change. A lot of these devices are expensive, so they're cost prohibitive. So if they are covered, if they can, if people can access funds to help them acquire these devices, that's a big headache that will be removed from them. Lastly, providing support and information is super important. So you can have the best tool, the best AT given to a client, but if they don't have the proper information, so that means training and the subsequent support for example, the first couple of weeks or months after they've received the device and received the initial training, well, the usage will not be successful. So support over a longer period than the initial formal training is very important. So now, when a client has accepted to use a new AT, what are the impacts on their life? Again, quality of life will be bettered. Independence and autonomy will increase. Mobility, security are also bettered. Social and community participation is also guaranteed. Physical and psychological well-being is increased, and financial impacts for being able to get a job, employment, and have a better financial security also is a plus. A quick professional experience of mine, which captures what I've just covered, is a client of mine who has dexterity difficulty and wanted to use his computer's keyboard. But his resistance to change was his focus on typing fast. So for him, he really had to type fast so that he could find a job. And one of the things my first thought was to use, instead of using a regular keyboard, which has the arrows on the right side and the number pad, I went with a mini keyboard with a cover. It's called a key guard, where it's a plastic cover with holes in it for the keys, so that when you have reduced dexterity, then you can hit the keys through the hole without hitting the keys on the sides, thus minimizing the number of typing mistakes you're using. So for me, that was a slam dunk answer, and it was easy. But because of my client's resistance to change, which was he really had to type really fast, making minimal mistakes to get a proper job, he felt that typing through the holes was too slow for him. Even if I showed him that he made way less mistakes, almost no mistakes with the mini key guard with the key guard. But for him, it was not enough. It was too slow for him because he had to really target his keys through each hole, and that was way too long. So I had to find other alternatives, which were big key keyboard, and I use also the motivational interviewing techniques to show him the positives of using alternative devices than what he was thinking, and showing him concretely that he was making way less mistakes using for example, the big key keyboard. And because he was making less mistakes, he had to delete and retype and delete and retype way less, thus typing faster. So to really ensure that he saw the benefits, again, I made practice sessions using regular tech, using the adaptive tech to just show him and to time him, to show, make him notice the reduced number of mistakes being made. And also I introduced accessibility features of the computer, for example, sticky keys for use for making multiple key combinations. For example, Control-Alt-Delete. Normally you need 3 fingers for this combination, but with sticky keys, the computer recognizes that if you hit the keys sequentially, it recognizes it as 3 keys being pressed at the same time. So sticky keys and other accessibility features that I introduced to show him that it was possible for him to type using the adaptive technology, the keyboard, and the accessibility features in Windows to type efficiently, fast, with minimal mistakes. And with that, making him more confident in his use of the technology while achieving his goal. So basically, I was supporting his self-efficacy to using the technology and achieving his goals of typing fast so that he will eventually find a job in the future. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening to my presentation. I will stop sharing. Here we are. So Dave, you have the mic.
Ella, thank you so much. That was such an interesting presentation, especially when you talk about that evolution, right? It's not just putting the tools in somebody's hands, it's making sure you continue in an ongoing way to engage with that tool and learn to maximize the tool. I'm sure that's something that a lot of people in this room deeply understand when it comes to accessible technology and the way that they utilize it. For the sake of time, because I do want to make sure there's some room for questions at the end here, I'm going to skip the next testimonial and just jump into our next speaker, our next contributor, and that's Mark Pentland from the Premier's Council on Disability Communication and Engagement Coordinator. Mark joined the council with 20 years of experience in several government departments and agencies, most recently with the New Brunswick Community College. During this time, Mark has led or participated in many provincial consultations and engagement initiatives on topics like rural development, Indigenous issues, and the volunteer sector. He's also worked in the private sector as a management consultant, primarily working with clients in the healthcare, education, and nonprofit sectors. And with that, I welcome in Mark Pentland. Mark, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm experiencing some, I'll have a presentation. I will see if I can share it. I've had some bandwidth issues here at the office. So we'll see if this works. If it doesn't work, so can anyone see my presentation?
No, it's still just showing you.
All right. So that's the issues I'm
Okay.
having today. So that is fine. I can yeah, I'm still my my
If you want to
IT
just speak, and then we can put the presentation
Yeah.
on the site after to share. Perfect.
Definitely, and I'll definitely do that. So yes, as Dave mentioned, my name is Mark Pentland. I'm with the Premier's Council on Disabilities. The Premier's Council has been around for many years now, originally formed in the early 80s as a result of a provincial conference. So the Premier's Council's mandate is to be a body for consultation and study, which was created by government to be advised on matters related to persons with a disability. So the idea is the vision of the council is New Brunswick, where all persons are accepted, included, and valued. So basically, the council was created by an act of legislation. So within the legislation, the Premier's Council uses the definition of a disability. We use the human rights approach to the definition of a disability. So our definition, which is within the legislation, is a person who has a long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, which in interaction with the various barriers may hinder a person's full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. So that is taking the human rights approach to disability. And it is consistent with the definition that's used in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with a Disability, which was ratified by the UN in 2006, and which Canada passed or ratified in 2010, I believe. So that's the definition that we work with at the council. It's in our legislation. But as we can all know, definitions change over time. So personally, from my personal perspective, there are a few things missing within that definition, as we've seen with other legislation, the Accessible Canada Act, and legislation that has passed recently. One of the things that I find is missing from that definition is intermittent or sporadic and short term. So in the last batch, Accessible Canada Act would be an example. Those are included in the definition. So the definition that we're working with in our legislation is a person who has a long-term physical disability. So that's one thing that we make note of, is that definition has been evolving throughout the years since the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with a Disability was first declared in 2006. So what does the council do? So basically, we take in information from individuals and groups. We undertake research. We propose programs and legislation and policies and practices back to government. We publish reports and studies. We consult and collaborate with stakeholders, and we offer advice to departments and agencies who are dealing with persons with a disability. And we sit on various federal, provincial, territorial committees and working groups. So one of the primary, our kind of three big things that we do at the council would be, we promote Disability Awareness Week that takes place at the end of May into June. We host an event in conjunction with the acknowledgement or the celebration of United Nations International Day of Persons with a Disability, which takes place on December 3rd. So plug here for Neil Squire Society and the Makers Making Change program. the last number of years, we've partnered with Neil Squire to do a toy build on around December 3rd. So we would build adaptive toys for children. So that again, we'll be doing that again this year on around about December 3rd, which I think is a Sunday. So on that Friday in Fredericton, we'll be hosting an event in conjunction with the Neil Squire Society to build toys again, or modify toys for children who have a disability. And one of the other primary things that we do is the Disability Action Plan, which was last put out in 2020. So we're in the process now of looking at the next Disability Action Plan. So that Disability Action Plan came out in 2020 after a huge consultation process. We had a 2-day forum around Disability Awareness Week. We had one-on-one meetings with stakeholders. We had public meetings throughout the province, and we put together a Disability Action Plan that had 43 recommendations back to government on some kind of grouped into primary areas of concern: employment, housing, poverty, education, transportation, accessibility issues, disability sports, and recreation and leisure activities are the availability and accessibility of those. So some of the recommendations that we made, obviously back within that Disability Action Plan, of the 43, one of the big ones, we recommended that the Department of Social Development remove persons with a disability from the regular categories and policies under social assistance and create an entirely separate disability benefit program. So that was a recommendation in the plan. We recommended that GNB develop and implement a dedicated strategy to enhance access to mental health services for people with a disability, including people that have co-occurring disability. And we also made a recommendation that the province promote the uptake of those of people who are eligible for registered disability savings plan. So that's one of my kind of personal issues of interest as well. New Brunswick has a terribly low uptake in those who are eligible for the RDSP of actually opening an RDSP. Last numbers that I saw were below 20%. So that's below 20% of those who already have the disability tax credit, who actually then follow through and get an RDSP. So the federal government had provided us with some numbers in that if those who are eligible, so they already have the disability tax credit and are eligible to open an RDSP, if those individuals walked into the bank tomorrow and opened RDSPs, the average reach back for those individuals is 6 to 7 years. So they're looking at actual numbers, not hypothetical in this case, that they would be eligible for a kind of transfer of funds from the federal government to those individuals of potentially $36 million. So that's what people with a disability are leaving on the table in New Brunswick at this point. And if all those who are eligible to get the disability tax credit actually applied and got it, that number would be obviously much higher. But that $36 million is just those that actually have the disability tax credit currently. So one of the big issues that came out of the last Disability Action Plan was that New Brunswick should implement an Accessibility Act for New Brunswick. So like I said, our report came out in 2020. That year in the throne speech, the province committed to exploring the possibility of enacting accessibility legislation for New Brunswick. Then in July 2021, there was a motion 78 in the legislature, which was passed, and that motion called for the province to proactively eliminate and prevent barriers to ensure greater opportunities and access to services for people with a disability, and to ensure New Brunswickers receive services and that are accessible to all, that they are able to move freely around public buildings and public spaces, that they have access to all employment opportunities and access to workplaces, have accessible digital content and technologies, and receive barrier-free services. So that was a motion that was passed on the floor of the legislature that was supported by all parties. So that was in July of 2021. So then as a result of that motion, the government announced the formation of a select committee on accessibility for New Brunswick. So that committee was formed, and their mandate was to consult with New Brunswickers, to consult with individuals with a disability, then report back to the Legislative Assembly with recommendations. So in June 2021, that committee had their first meeting. 2021 is quite some time ago now. And over a couple of week period, they held, again, also recognized that this was happening during COVID. So that kind of restricted the ability to have face-to-face public meetings, but they did happen to that committee. Over several weeks, invited parties gave presentations to that committee that was made up of MLAs from all parties. So that consultation process, which was phase one, went right up until October 2022, which was last year. At this time, they've wrapped up that first phase. So over that first phase of that consultation process, there was a total of 24 presenters, groups that presented in front of that committee, and they received 29 written submissions as well. So in December of 2022, that committee, made up of members of the Legislative Assembly, produced a report that was called Nothing About Us, Without Us, Moving Together Towards an Accessible New Brunswick. So that interim report from that committee had 5 recommendations at that point that they were making back to the Legislative Assembly as a whole. And the first recommendation was that government actually prepare accessibility legislation and move forward with that. So that was one of the recommendations of that report. One of the second recommendation was that draft legislation be completed by May of 2023. We are no longer May, obviously. So that has not happened as of yet. So we're kind of waiting for that next step. So the next step would be for either draft legislation or a framework of what that legislation would look like to go back out for another round of consultation. And the third recommendation was that the government of New Brunswick create an agreement and a memorandum of understanding with Accessibility Standards Canada, so that our provincial standards are benchmarked against the Canadian standard. One of the big things that obviously Accessibility Standards Canada and the federal government is interested in is having kind of consistency across the province. So I'll quickly wrap up. There were just 2 more recommendations. So, and one of the other recommendations is that government New Brunswick take bold actions to strengthen its efforts to hire people with a disability, which working in government, I can see that is happening in some sectors. There has been some projects and some movement in that direction. And this other one was that government of New Brunswick prioritized the development of income support programs specifically tailored to people with a disability. Again, similar to the Act going out for consultation, we haven't seen movement on that as of yet. Now, I can say that both of those, the province is working on both of those 2 things. From our standpoint, they're not working on them fast enough. The movement is not happening as quick as the council would like, but we know that that's happening. So basically, we're waiting now with government. The draft of accessibility legislation is in their corner at this point. And similarly with the recommendation we made around income support programs for persons with a disability. So that's quickly a bit of a kind of how we got where we are right now and where we are right now. So if anyone has any questions after, they can definitely follow up with me directly.
Hey, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to lay some of that groundwork and some of the work that's going on there at the provincial level. Some really interesting, thoughtful information there about the RDSP as well. I know that's something that on my show we talk about quite a bit, about getting more people when they can eligible for that program and enrolled in that program, because it really is a excellent resource for people with disabilities trying to save for retirement. Imagine that. What a concept. So I know...
Just to add on that, and kind of it's very kind of the timeline is it now that it's been around for over 10 years. So you can only reach back 10 years. So up until this point, you could get the full 10 if you were eligible for your RDSP 10 years ago. But as we move forward, people are losing years of eligibility now. So it's really kind of imperative that people who can sign up and open an RDSP.
A real sense of urgency on that one.
The coalition is working with CRA on this, and we're going to start doing testimonials and little ads that involve people who have opened them and talking about how great it's been for them, because we've already done some promotion of this, and it's, I missed out on the cutoff line because I didn't know about it. So I want to make sure that nobody else gets in that situation.
Well, Shelley, I know that you're trying to get us out of here in about 10 minutes or so, but I think we probably have time for a couple of questions, don't we?
What we did, Muriel and I looked through the chat, and we found one that we made a combined question out of a bunch, and we were going to pose it and then have each of the speakers respond. We thought might be the easiest way.
What a great idea. You know what I'll do? I'll sort of let you take that one, because if you guys have it prepared and written in front of you, I'll let you move the cones.
Okay. So it says in this count block. So a lot of people comment. Mark, your pin, so you get to answer first, then I'll bring the other ones up. So they talked a lot about these tools and how cool they were and how great they look. But the cost, right? So if you're getting $866 a month, if you're one of the 30% of people who actually get accepted to the extended benefits, or if you're making less, it's hard to afford those. So if you don't have private insurance, are there suggestions or recommendations on how people could get some of these tools covered besides begging or creating their own GoFundMe, I guess?
I'll unmute myself, but yeah, that's a biggie. That is one of the issues that at the council, we're not really a frontline agency where we provide programs and services, but we definitely do hear input from clients. So that is one of the big things that we're hearing from clients that are looking for either motorized mobility aids or mobility aids in general. The cost of those are definitely prohibitive. And what we do with the council is we're continually working with social development, saying, you know, talking about the programs and services that they provide and how they could change the eligibility criteria to address some of these issues. So from an advocacy point of view, that is definitely something that we talk to government about on an ongoing basis. Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet when it comes to that issue, that there's no magical pot of money that we can have access to, unfortunately.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Alain, you're up there on the screen. Could you maybe respond to that? So is any ideas of where we could turn to help get some coverage, or things that you've seen clients be successful with?
I'm not very involved with the funding of it, so I wouldn't be the best person to answer.
Okay. Maybe Philip, I know it's federal from accessibility standards, but any ideas of how we could push to get more coverage for that?
Yeah, I almost hate to say that we're a federal government, but we're not responsible, or we don't have a mandate to actually look at funding. But having said that, I think there's opportunities that may exist with some of the NGOs, some of the not-for-profit organizations, where they can put out, I'm just spitballing this right now. This is not something the government is going to do, but this is something that could happen. They could have a sharing program where tools, equipment that are no longer being used by certain groups, or that have been outgrown by certain groups, could be used through some sort of mechanism. I'm not sure if there's something that exists like that right now, with some of the organizations, but that may be an opportunity there.
Yeah. There is a new store in St. John called Seniors Discount 65. And I guess that now I've not been in there, but I saw their ad, and I guess that they take a lot of equipment that's still usable, you know, so when my mom can no longer use her wheelchair, well, probably because she's dead, then that chair, I would bring it there and donate it. And it's something that could be purchased for pennies on the dollar. But even that's hard for some people, but it would make it easier, I guess, for groups to purchase it. So most, Stefan or Dr. Mills, any ideas there?
So
Want
funding,
to give out some free chairs?
well, we do have a foundation that I think is coming to Canada. It's been in the States. I don't have a lot of details yet. As a prescriber, funding is always the biggest challenge. And one of the reasons why I showed a lot of what I showed is that I still think that even though our funding agencies can't always fund everything, I still think it's incredibly important for end users to understand that there is available technologies. And so you kind of jokingly said, well, you know, we're not going to start our own GoFundMe pages. Well, maybe that's a step. You know, sometimes funding agencies will fund certain aspects of, you qualify for certain aspects of you advocating or getting or doing your own self-funding is I'm always talking to my clients about that. Going to different nonprofits, like someone else suggested, going to different societies, Cancer Society, MD Society. Those are some options that you can look at. There are some grant programs. I believe even, you know, Loblaws may have, or Superstore may have some grant programs. There are some monies that can be accessed. There are some amazing social workers that this is something that I don't know a ton about. I work privately in New Brunswick, so I work mainly with people who did have insurance. But that being said, being proactive. But the other thing I always tell people is, do not hesitate to reach out to your local member of parliament and to advocate for yourself. What we need better funding programs. So we, you know, I think we might be having some elections coming up. This is a thing that needs to, the people, the policymakers need to understand. And so as end users, I always say, A, vote. B, please talk to those members of government and let them know the challenges of getting the right equipment. So
we are the largest group in New Brunswick. If we stuck together and we all voted, we could mandate change, but we all have to show up and vote.
So I mean, this could be a lot of, anyway, it's hard to squeeze all this into 10 minutes. So, but at least some ideas.
Yeah.
Shelley.
Yeah.
Shelley, while listening to the others speak, I just, a couple of ideas. Easter Seal program is one. And I saw one member just write it in the chat. And also Ability New Brunswick has does a lot of legwork finding finance,
helping to find,
help people finding financing. So
yeah,
I think those two.
It's easier, I think, sometimes if you have a visible disability, or like, you know, but when you've got something like fibro and it's not as visible, sometimes it's harder to get that help, but we will keep fighting. And Dr. Mills, get you to have what to say there.
Yeah, I think everybody said things that I was going to suggest. It isn't really something I deal with directly. Our occupational therapists and social workers do most of that here in terms of helping people find or accessing equipment through insurance or used equipment. So it's not really what I deal with directly, but I know it is always a big issue. And I know that I remember somebody pointing out to me that for a lot of people with disabilities, these pieces of equipment are like life and death. And, you know, why can people get pacemakers or knee replacements, you know, under the healthcare system for free, but they can't get something that is absolutely essential for their lives. And I think that's an argument we just still need to
there's
keep making.
no coverage for anything for my disability, not to make it a personal thing, but I have multiple chemical sensitivity. I need to go to a papper mass. That's over $7,000. If I have to get that, that's completely out of my pocket. And the air, my air purifier, which went off yesterday because we lost power, and that's when I realized how much it helps me breathe, is $5,000, and it has to be replaced every 5 years, and that's out of pocket. If I was stuck on the provincial system, I would have had to turn to MAID already. So these are things we don't want people to have to think of as an option. We shouldn't have to turn to MAID because of a lack of resources. But we're at 4 o'clock. So what we're going to do is, there's some great questions in the chat, but we will collect them and we're going to send them off to all the presenters, and we're going to get these answers for you folks. Just before we go, I really want to thank all of our presenters. You guys did such a great job, and this is just for us. We want people to know this is a start. We knew this one was going to be jam-packed and there wouldn't be a lot of time for question and answer, but going forward into the winter, we want to do short sessions focused on certain types of disabilities. So we'll have a day, right tools for autism. And we're going to turn to the specialists in autism. I have a daughter with autism, but I'm not a specialist, but there's a lot out there. And talk about some of the tools we can use to help, make them short and sweet. And that way we can also leave lots of times for questions, answers, comments, and sharing, because our members, you guys are a lot of the experts on this, because we become experts because we have no choice but to become experts. So I hope that this has helped out to people. I really want to thank our presenters. I really want to thank our host with the most, Mr. Dave Brown, our 2 amazing ASL interpreters. We really can't thank you enough. To all of our members and guests, thank you so much. And we really hope that this session helped people with learning about tools, because the more we know, the more we can ask for, the more we can fight for, the more we can demand. And that's starting this Tuesday at the March in Fredericton, if anyone can make it, for the eradication of poverty in New Brunswick. We've moved backwards, not forward, and some of the greatest people living in that disability are our members, simply because they have a disability, and that's not right. You know, but this was a great event, and we're so happy that you could join us. We will take this recording. We're going to put it to YouTube and place it on the page so that people can refer back to it. Like I said, in the winter, we're going to have some more sessions, and you'll be able to find the video on our new Facebook page, www.nbcpd.org, where you can also go and become a member. It's one of the few things left in this world that's actually free. And out of that, you get a card, and we'll tell you how you can save some money on your phone bill and your cell bill with the disability. So again, thank you all so much. And Dave, I'll leave the last word to you before we sign off.
Well, I want to express my gratitude and thanks again. This was a really interesting webinar, lots of information, lots to take away, lots to digest. I hope that you enjoyed yourselves. I hope that you get something to take away from this, as well as you talk to friends, family, etc., as the day moves along. But I hope everybody has a lovely, lovely rest of their weekend and a lovely week. And hopefully we get a chance to get together real soon.
Thank you all so much. And we're going to be in touch with the for our presenters with a little thank you. So
Thanks, everyone.
thank you. Have a good day, everyone.